Hey y'all, I'm the Drink Pro. Today we're reviewing High West's Yippee Ki-Yay! What's up everybody, Kyle the Drink Pro here with you yet again. Thank you as always for joining me on this channel. Thanks for watching, thanks for sharing it with your friends, thanks for commenting your thoughts below. I've got a fun one today, one that a lot of people have had or have seen on the shelf. Some people turned it down. It's harder to find than it used to be, but it's still out there. That is High West's Yippee Ki-Yay. Now this is a continuation of my sourced whiskey series, and I wanted to do something that was sourcing not just one product and doing a single bottling or buying from one place and finishing it in some different way or aging it longer. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more creative and intensive. And what they have done over at High West with Yippee Ki-Yay is a great example of taking a purchased whiskey, a sourced whiskey, and making something really unique out of it. High West was founded in 2006 by David and Jane Perkins. Now, David was a biochemist earlier in his career and became fascinated with the process of fermentation and distillation, which makes whiskey making an easy choice. But he was also fascinated with the Wild West, which is why he founded his distillery in, of all places, Park City, Utah. Utah is not known for being very alcohol friendly, and in 2006 they became the first legal distillery in the state since 1870. My beard's getting too long. Holy shit. Now, I already mentioned that High West is doing something fun with Yippee Ki-Yay by blending together several different sourced whiskeys and their own distillate, but they're also doing some fun finishing on the process for blending them together, proofing it down, and creating their 92 proof Yippee Ki-Yay product. Now, this is a blend of 3 different ryes. The classic 95.5, that's 95% rye, 5% malted barley, that comes out of MGP, one of the most well-known sourcing companies in the world. They also, though, are sourcing from Barton, and people don't realize that Barton actually sources a lot of whiskey. Kirkland, in fact, the Costco brand bourbon is sourced from Barton. Now, this Barton product is actually a barely legal rye. It's 53% rye, 37% corn, and 10% barley. Finally, they blend in some of their own rye, which is actually a 100% rye product, but 80% is a standard rye and 20% is a malted rye. Now, if you don't know, malting is actually a maturation process that actually allows the fermentation to begin to happen. Without any malted grain in a mash bill, you have to use enzymes to get it to actually start to ferment. There is a wide age range on this product. It's not age stated on the bottle, but on the website and on the literature that they distribute for people who are doing reviews and things like this, it says between 2 and 16-year-old distillate goes into this batch. Now, I have to guess there's probably more 2 than 16, given that wide of an age range, but you know there's some distillate in here that's at least 16 years old, or else they wouldn't be able to say it on their advertisements. But it might just be a little bit. Nonetheless, once they get these 2 different source products, along with their own product, all completed in their normal American white oak aging process, they then finish the whiskeys in 2 different kinds of barrels, in California Syrah and California Vermouth. So we're gonna get some interesting wine properties to this probably. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get to pouring the sample. By the way, these Drink Pro glasses are still available, thedrinkpro@gmail.com. One other quick thought before I get to the review here. Shout out to Sophia Lipka for providing me with the sample. She also provided me with a sample of Midwinter Night's Dram Act 8 Scene 5. I might do a little bit of comparison at the end of this, but a full review will be coming in the future. So go ahead and subscribe so you can catch that. Well, on the nose, you can definitely smell the wine influence. I mean, it is prominent. And I gotta say, the vermouth really comes forward on the initial nosing. The first thing I smell is a very prominent rye grain and vermouth kind of together, which is not my favorite nose, to be honest with you. But then after a while, you keep smelling it and the grapes become a little bit sweeter. The Syrah starts to take over. Although there is still this sort of mustiness. I've got to guess that comes from the vermouth, because it's not a nose that I usually find in whiskey or in wine for that matter. There are a couple of exceptions, but nothing that would apply here. Yeah, man, the nose on this is so dominated by the wine. I don't know how long they finished the product, but given that there are 3 different ryes in here, I would expect the rye to be a little bit more prominent on the nose and the whiskey to be more prominent on the nose. I mean, if you told me that this was just aged its entire life in some sort of wine cask, I would believe you. I guess when you really dig down, you can get sort of a light, almost cotton candy nose. that light, airy sugar, that almost artificiality, maybe a bubble gum. I've heard people talk about cotton candy and bubble gum sort of in the same sentence, and I can kind of get both of them on this. I actually get like a hint of pickled ginger, which is different. That's not even those I usually pull out of a whiskey, or let alone a rye. You know, usually with the 95.5 MGP, I get some sort of like mintiness or herbal quality up front. I guess there's a little bit of that, but it's so subtle in background, it becomes a lot more like a bubble gum. I think the last kinds of notes that I'm pulling when I'm really spending probably too much time on the nose, I get sort of like a honey dipped cedar plank with like mint leaves sprinkled on top next to a vase of geraniums. How about that? How's that for visual imagery? Shout out to Nate for the geranium note. He hates that note, and I love how much he hates it. Should I dance so the TikTok kids will like me? No. All right, let's go ahead and taste this. Now, as I mentioned, it's 92 proof. So, to me, that's sort of a sweet spot for drinking, because you can drink that later on in a session after a couple of pours, and it won't feel like you're drinking water unless you've been drinking some really high proof stuff. Even then, sometimes it feels like a nice reprieve. And if it's the start of the session, like today, the first drink of the day, it doesn't feel like I'm coming in too hot or I'm coming in with a vengeance. It's a nice introduction for my palate to the whiskey profile. I tell you, again, that wine characteristic is really prominent. I can almost like feel the vermouth like in the back of my mouth, like right before my throat. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure how much I like it. I'm not a big vermouth guy, though. Some people just love vermouth. So if you love a Manhattan, for example, which already has some sweet vermouth in it, then, you know, you might feel more comfortable with this. I like a Manhattan from time to time, but it's not my go-to cocktail. Now, once you kind of get over that initial shock of the wine characteristics in this, it is very vermouth forward, front, and mid palate. I definitely get vermouth in the back of my mouth, and mid palate into the finish, I have a lot of the sweetness and the wine grape flavor. It's almost that bitter wine skin or grape skin flavor sometimes as well. But once you get over that, there's actually a really nice presentation of ryes in this. You get a little bit of the bright citrusy, the younger ryes. You get some ryes that almost have that herbal quality, which is what I expect from the MGP blended into here. But because of that barely legal rye, I'm also getting sort of a sweeter, almost like a sweet oak quality, which can come from the age and can come, in my experience, from older pours that are low rye ryes. Right at the start of the palate, I'm getting like hazelnuts, which is a really weird note and not one I call out very often. That's kind of interesting. I'm surprised how sweet it is throughout. I know it's a wine finish, and I know it's the lots of rye pours blended together, but the sweetness is the kind that I tend to aim for, which I rarely get in ryes. I almost rarely get it in bourbons at this point, but it's a surprisingly sweet pour without feeling like it's syrupy or candy sweet. It's got that really nice blend of the sharpness of rye grain, the sharpness of oak, and the nuttiness, which can be a little bit bitter and a little bit sharp, but also a pretty easy drinking caramel syrupy sweetness that's not overbearing, but is consistent throughout the pour. The more I keep drinking this, on the front of the palate, the nuttiness and the sweetness and kind of the high, sharp herbal qualities from the rye all sort of mesh together to become almost like a coffee cake or some sort of dessert bread. Ooh, and now I'm getting a lot more black pepper on the finish as well. The more I keep drinking it, the finish becomes really interestingly complex. I'm actually surprised how complex this is. I guess I shouldn't be. It's 3 different whiskeys blended together using 2 different finishes, but sometimes something like that can end up collapsing a blend, which basically is like collapsing sounds together. If you have 2 sounds that can cancel each other out, then you actually narrow the soundscape. That's how compression works, by the way, if you've ever had an MP3 compared to a lossless media file. Nerd out about music for a while. But it kind of feels like an uncompressed whiskey, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it does. I don't know if I care that it does. This is pretty damn tasty. I get maybe a hint of stewed peaches in the mid palate, but other than that and the obvious grape notes from the wine, the fruit is pretty quiet throughout this pour, and I think for me that's the one thing it's missing that I really like. But given how balanced it is, given how complex it is at the same time, this thing really has a lot going for it. I would say if you don't like wine finishes at all, if you just cannot handle the wine flavor at all, this is probably not the whiskey for you. But if you like any wine finish products, this is definitely worth exploring, because if you can get over that initial hit of, wow, this tastes like it's wine finished for damn sure, then you'll find a really rewarding, well-blended, complex profile. I think that's about all that needs to be said about this. If you can find a bottle of it, I would definitely pick it up. It's definitely worth trying and having in your collection. And even if you're not a big wine finished whiskey drinker, this is something to have on the shelf. And maybe every once in a while, pour yourself 2 ounces and sit there and spend time with it, because I've been amazed just in filming this video how much it's changed and evolved while I've spent time with it over the last 20 or 30 minutes. So it's definitely a pour that evolves, and it's definitely something that you can spend a lot of time with, which for the price point, I think it's under $100 MSRP. I'm not sure what the secondary is on it, but it's a pretty good price for it. Now I'm going to do a quick preview side-by-side with this. This is the Midwinter Night's Dram Act 8 Scene 5. I'm going to do a full review of this later, so get subscribed so you can see it. But just for a quick side-by-side, I'm going to taste the Midwinter, and then I'm going to taste the Yippee Ki-Yay. You ready? All right, Yippee Ki-Yay. All right, Midwinter. Ooh, I gotta tell you. Now, this is the Act 8 Midwinter. But first impressions, I think I prefer the Yippee Ki-Yay, which is a cheaper pour and probably easier to get your hands on. The Midwinter just doesn't seem as complex, at least on first blush, but we will revisit those pours. So, like I said before, stay tuned, get subscribed, and you guys keep drinking like professionals. I'm gonna have to pour myself some more or something. Cheers.